to On With The Show, where we delve into the intriguing stories that have shaped the world of performing arts. I'm your host, Leo Sullivan. Join me as we witness one of the most unlikely, pivotal points of the Cold War, the defection of Russian ballet superstar Rudolf Nureyev. An incident that changed the zeitgeist for ballet in the Western world and humiliated the USSR. So, without further ado, let's dive into the spotlight and explore the stories behind the curtain. This is On With The Show. It was June 1961, just 2 months after the Soviet Union had sent the first human, Yuri Gagarin, into space, and relations between the West and the Soviet Union had thawed enough for the USSR to allow the state ballet company, the Kirov, to perform in Paris. The tour of the Kirov Ballet was engineered to demonstrate that not only were the USSR ahead technologically, but artistically and culturally. Unknown outside of Russia, their up-and-coming male lead was Rudolf Nureyev. Rudolf was obnoxious, arrogant, disrespectful, and one of the best dancers the company had ever produced. Lady Deborah Macmillan, who worked as a designer and producer for the Royal Ballet in London, described seeing him dance as like seeing something from outer space. There was the English style, which was extremely polite and refined, and this extremely animalistic person appeared. And from then on, the bar had been raised. Nureyev changed the role of the male ballet dancer from mainly supporting the ballerinas to being allowed to take centre stage. By the late 1950s, Rudolf Nureyev was becoming a sensation in the Soviet Union. However, only 3 months prior to the Kirov's exhibition in Paris, he was not selected to tour due to his ongoing rule-breaking and distasteful attitude towards the other dancers and the management of the company. Instead, ballet master and artistic director Konstantin Sergeyev decided to use the tour as a swan song to dance with his wife, Natalia Dudinskaya. At the time, Janine Ringay, who was working for the Parisian Artistic and Literary Agency, was in charge of the cultural exchange between France and the USSR and was in Leningrad in the winter of 1960 to arrange the tour. After viewing the Kirov's proposed repertoire, Janine asked to see Don Quixote. Although discouraged by Sergeyev, Janine went anyway, and on seeing Nureyev for the first time, she reported back to her French colleagues that she had seen the best dancer in the world. And so, Rudolf was going to Paris, where he was given the lead in Swan Lake. Nureyev's first performance was a resounding success, electrifying the audience and critics. However, on exiting the stage, Sergeyev reminded the dancers that it was a Saturday, and Saturday audiences were more forgiving. Taking this as a personal slight, Rudolf stormed off. The Kirov dancers did not engage greatly with their French counterparts. However, Rudolf was different. Although he did not speak French, he had determinedly taught himself English and was therefore able to communicate more than his colleagues. He was introduced to Clara Sant, the 21-year-old socialite daughter of a South American painter. Clara was engaged to Vincent Malraux, the son of the French Minister of Culture. Clara described Nureyev as having the curiosity of a child, always asking questions. With Clara, he saw musicals and cabarets for the first time. All the time, Rudolf was being followed. He and his friends were always aware of this. Rudolf took to sneaking out of the hotel kitchen. When his minders caught up with him, he baited them by sending food to them in restaurants or bringing food back to the hotel to give to whomever was waiting for him on his return. Everything was reported back to Moscow, including accusations that Clara was a paid CIA operative. The Kirov was so successful in Paris that plans were made for them to stage a production at the Palais du Sport, with an audience of 5,000. It was a risk. No one had performed a ballet there before. Nureyev was the draw, and even Sergeyev knew it. A few days before the performance was due to take place, Moscow sent orders recalling Rudolf to the USSR. It was a catastrophe for the Kirov. In an attempt to save the tour, Sergeyev and his wife Natalia appealed to the Russian ambassador in Paris. The condition? Rudolf had to be brought back into line and forbidden from seeing his new friends. When he took to the stage at the Palais, there was a commotion, as during the third act of Swan Lake, Nureyev slipped and fell in one of his many exceptional leaps. He demanded the orchestra stop. The whole auditorium became quiet as he left the stage, only to return a moment later and gesture to the orchestra to begin his section again. The newspaper reports the next day raved about his virtuosity, and Rudolf felt invincible. In Paris, he could do no wrong. Later that night, however, Yuri Solovyev, a fellow dancer who was sharing a hotel suite with Nureyev, demanded a separate room. Rumours abounded that Rudolf had made sexual advances towards him. Reluctant at first to work with the KGB agents minding the Kirov, on threat of returning early to Moscow and himself being accused of homosexuality, which carried a 7-year prison sentence, Solovyev became their informer. A new recall order was sent for Rudolf, and this time it could not be avoided. On June 16, 1961, when the Kirov Company gathered at Le Bourget Airport in Paris to fly to London, Sergeyev took Nureyev aside and told him that he must return to Moscow for a special performance in the Kremlin, rather than go to London with the rest of the company. Nureyev became suspicious and refused. Next, he was told his mother had fallen severely ill and he needed to go home immediately to see her. Watching in tears as his fellow performers left, he gestured the Russian sign language sign for prison. An urgent phone call was made to Clara, who dashed to the airport. Allowed a final goodbye with his friend, Rudolf quietly begged her for help. She made her way to the police based at the airport and explained what was happening and to whom. Even knowing who Nureyev was, the police were unable to assist unless Rudolf himself came to them. Clara returned to Rudolf and whispered, "It's just like a ballet. You need to jump." Sensing what was about to happen, the KGB minders grabbed him, but too late. He used all his mighty power to dash past the French police officers who blocked the bodyguard. As a scuffle ensued, the officers shouted, "Don't touch me, you're in France now." Rudolf was taken directly to the commissar at the airport, who spoke fluent Russian. Rather than comfort Nureyev, this unnerved him further, thinking he'd been lured into a trap. An explanation that the commissar had been born in Russia but was indeed French. Rudolf eventually calmed down enough to speak and signed documents with Clara as witness, formally asking for asylum in France. The KGB were granted an interview with Nureyev, promising that if he performed at the Kremlin, they would personally ensure he went to London straight after to rejoin the Kirov. In a somewhat theatrical gesture, the commissar presented Rudolf with the 2 doors in his office. If he took the left door, he was staying in France, the door on the right, and he was agreeing to return to Russia. He took the left door, rejoining Clara, who had been given instructions to find a place to keep him hidden, as the KGB would continue to pursue him. She was told to stay away from Rudolf, as she too would be followed. The Kirov, now in London, found out via the newspaper headlines the next day. The feelings of the dancers in the company was one of betrayal, both personally and on behalf of Mother Russia. In response, the KGB effectively imprisoned them, locked in their rooms when not rehearsing and performing. They were in almost constant rehearsals with only 3 days to replace Rudolf. Yuri Solovyev received some of the parts he had coveted most, but he was smaller than Rudolf and struggled to work with partner Alla Osipenko. Nureyev, ironically, found himself in a similar position, trapped in an apartment, unable to leave in case the KGB discovered where he was. Feeling like he was going mad, he demanded Clara's help. She called the Grand Ballet du Marquis de Cuevas. Weeks before, Nureyev had seen their performance of Sleeping Beauty. He had been vocal about how awful he thought it was. Yet so desperate was he to dance again, he performed with them just 2 weeks later. There was a press conference on the morning of his performance, with hundreds of journalists and photographers. The whole world was watching. In a statement, Rudolf declared, "I can never return to my country, but I will never be happy in yours." On opening night, he received 3 letters from his mother, father, and from his teacher, Alexander Pushkin, all admonishing him for betraying his homeland and begging him to return to Russia. Rudolf was furious, understanding that those he held so dear were being used by the government to punish him. As he walked towards the stage, he could hear uproar in the audience, abuse being shouted by the crowd. It was not spontaneous, but organized. "Traitor, go back to your country." Broken glass and coins were hurled onto the stage. Unnerved as he was, he danced anyway. At the time, it was reported that Nureyev had stayed in Paris because he'd fallen in love with Clara. "It is very disagreeable, and we are sad about it, but he is young and she is beautiful," said interpreter Helen Konstantinovska. "We cannot understand how he can leave his motherland like this. He is a talented dancer and has had a wonderful education. Perhaps he will think better of it and come back to us." In October 1961, Nureyev was secretly invited to make his London debut at the annual gala organised by prima ballerina Dame Margot Fontaine for the Royal Academy of Dance. Nureyev danced Poème Tragique, a solo choreographed by Frederick Ashton, and the Black Swan Pas de Deux from Swan Lake with Rosella Hightower. During this time, he met Dame Ninette de Valois, director of the Royal Ballet, who invited him to dance with Fontaine in the next season. After the gala, he danced in the south of France and in New York before returning to London. When the Kirov returned to Russia, Nureyev was declared an enemy of the nation as he had committed an act of treason. Yuri Solovyev was taken to the KGB headquarters for questioning multiple times, causing him to become dejected and depressed. He took his own life in 1977, although the circumstances of this have been questioned. Alla Osipenko, who had partnered Nureyev during the tour, was banned from leaving Russia for 10 years. It was later claimed that the airport commissar had received a phone call the morning of Rudolf's defection, warning him that something might happen that day. Conspiracies abound as to whether in fact Nureyev was unwittingly used as a pawn to strike at the head of the KGB, Alexander Shelepin, who was greatly disliked by the committee. By pushing Nureyev to take the decision to defect, the KGB looked incompetent, and the book stopped with Shelepin, resulting in him being deposed. It was 26 years before Nureyev was able to return to Russia.